Good morning. Let's start today's lecture. So what we're going to do today is building on what we learned last time. So it's we talked about the grand challenges that are out there. And of course, every year they're being updated. I sent you the booklet with the 2012 grand challenges and a little more explanations to this, not just the titles as shown here, which this was published in Science, where I have this piece from. And yeah, so I hope now you had time to think about a little bit, having more creative, more challenging approaches to new things, not just being stuck in your field of expertise so far, but also expand your horizon. So what we're going to do today is then, I'm going to show you how one of the presentations could be done, not necessarily the way that you have to do it, but there are, of course, several things after you come up with an idea for one of these big engineering thoughts. You have to raise funds. And raising funds is, of course, several ways. One thing is you have to write proposals. That is a standard thing. Even if you're in industry, you have to write a short proposal to your higher boss when you start out, unless you own the company. If you own the company, you still write proposals because you need money from others. So no way around. You have to write something down, jot down something on paper. The closer, the better you're connected, the shorter the write-up, of course, will be. Sometimes a write-up can be easily 50 pages, 100 pages and more. But we keep it short here. So now you have basically written a proposal, but many times it's also not just necessary to write something, but also to present to these people. Because in the written version, it's sometimes not clear. And also, when we talk about written proposals, you will be shocked how little space there is for the science in the written proposal. Usually, you give the majority of the proposal. Many proposals that you submit in the United States are like 50 pages. 20 pages is just paperwork from the university and the requirements. Fulfill all little details that basically there's no increased noise when you do your research. There's no animal being hurt, no people subjects and so on. Or if there are, then it's fulfilled. And even if you don't do it, you have to provide paperwork for these things. And then you come down typically to, let's say, 10, 15 pages of text. And then many times you have to write about, in this text, all the other surrounding features, like how do you help people to get their PhD with this, or how do you mentor your postdocs. So it's not necessarily how do you solve the problem here. So it's a lot of stuff written in there. And so you find that in proposals, you have maybe 2 pages, 5 pages, sometimes 10 pages total to describe scientific research. So the rest is a lot of other stuff packaged around. Also, one of the things you have to typically explain is, so why do you propose now to improve, let's say, a supercapacitor? And then you have to explain, yeah, what is a broader merit for the society? Why can you use taxpayer dollars? Or what would be then the merit for a company if they sponsor this research? Yeah? So I'm going to show you now one example that is more towards the direction of companies. So let's say if you have a startup company, or if you want to raise funds from a company rather from a government agency, you still have to talk to the people. And so you have to give presentations on this. And you'll also see here it will be a little bit shorter in the science part and more on the outcome and so on. So just also, when you write these things, I gave you already an outline for a more scientific approach for this. But if you write these things let's say, in the direction of companies, angel funds that are out there you can get, this will also probably apply to crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. This would also apply to venture capitalists and companies, of course. And so what you would do then to them, you write a white paper, and typically the key thing is for them just 1 page, because everyone is so busy, as I told you before, you have to summarize everything shortly. And then, of course, the key thing here is title has to be really catchy to get their attention. And then your name, of course, contact information, so they can really reach you and don't mix it up, because they have a lot of these things. Yeah, and then the key thing is always, what is a problem? And not just the problem, because many times the problems, people are aware, yeah, we don't have enough energy, or there's not enough cheap energy, but what is the exactly gap in the technology that is there that you think you will be able to overcome? Because there's tons of problems. Yeah, there are fantastic solutions already available theoretically to overcome energy problems, expensive energy, but we have to come to problems that we can solve. So what's the gap? And then, of course, after that you come with a suggested solution, and with the best guess impact, how this would solve the problem. And then, of course, you have to come to the approach, how you would do the solution, because solution is just a general thing again. And then at the end, it's also important to write something about the expected outcome, because whatever you solve with your overcoming this gap, you will not provide solutions to everything. So it will be really specific. You might be lucky to open it to a larger area or field, but it might not be that broad. And that's something you can write here. And then depending on where you are in the stage of these talks, you might put in some information about how much manpower, how much money would be needed, or with a timeline in a short way. So people know you're dealing with something that you claim, oh, it needs 10 years, it needs 5 years, 2 years, yeah? And you know, typically when scientists say 10 years, that means it's far away. They say 20 years, so they don't expect it within their lifetime usually. So only things that are in the time frame of 1 year to 3 years, that's what people accept as realistic. Okay, so what's really important then when you give a presentation, you need to really be in contact with the audience. So don't spend too much time turning to your slide and trying to read what is on there. It's really important that you stay in contact with the audience. There's, of course, now one challenge a little bit nowadays. Everything happens globally. And that means you're not traveling everywhere all the time, especially for such first contacts. And that means you actually don't see your audience many times, because everything is on computer screens and telephone. So you might have shared computer screens, but you might not see each other directly. Sometimes you can, of course, have both. You see, you have camera, you have the slides, and you have voice. But that is still not very common. Typically, it's just really voice plus files online shared. So, but if you are in the presence of someone, then of course, stay in contact. These are really things that I've seen before. So some people just stare at their shoes all the time instead of talking to the people, or are so shy they always just stay here and mumble something. And so it's really important to talk to the people, look at them, and then you can also see how they respond to everything you do. There's a big problem for a lot of people. It's the anxiety when you meet a lot of people, especially strangers. If you are familiar with something, especially if you've given several talks, then you know, okay, group of scientists, you know how they respond. Because when you go to conferences, typically see most people, if they are not interested in your talk, they just fall asleep, and at the end, oh, it's over, let's clap. So you're safe. The same thing, actually, that's when you're in the military field and you, as an officer, you give a talk, everyone's quiet and so on, and at the end, everyone claps and you're safe. Nobody will ever doubt you because you're a superior. So for them, it's very easy to handle large masses, so they're not worried because they just command, be quiet, and people have to follow. But if you now go to other fields where you're not familiar with, especially if you switch around, let's say one day you do energy problems in materials, the next day you work in biology with algae, now you're suddenly at a congress with biologists, and biologists might behave a little bit differently, so you might be nervous. Or another thing could be, you're typically used to small rooms like this here, where you really can see the end and count the people, but suddenly you're in a big audience and you can actually see everything, and it's maybe 500,000 or more people. And that is a little bit here where it's really important then to learn a few tools about anxiety, how to control that, because I must say the stage fright that people get when you go there, it's really important to deal with it. One thing is, if you don't have stage fright, your talk will most likely be the most boring thing on earth. Because if you don't feel anything, you just go on there and most likely you're dull because you didn't feel anything before. And so there will be some anxiety, especially with really large audiences. So the question is, what can you do to lower that? And there's actually a lot of information available because it happens to a lot of people. It's always in performance and also in sports. Basically, if you're at the Olympics, 100-meter dash, and you make a little mistake and you're not getting gold medal. So these people have an enormous problem with anxiety, and so there's sports psychology, and they study this quantitatively, and that's actually what now other fields take over. So we know exactly what to do, and one of the key things to overcome anxiety is to visualize. So you start actually seeing yourself in front of the audience, how you present, or you see yourself after the talk, how superb it was, basically. So you put pictures in your mind that basically give you a very positive thought about the whole scenery. So you don't sit there as like, oh, I'm going to mess up, I'm going to be a loser, everyone will see how bad I am, because that's will destroy you when you go basically up and give a talk. So you have to do positive visualization. That is one of the things. There are several others. As I said, performance psychology from actually performance sports. That's where we typically get the best information nowadays. They don't study this quantitatively. And if you happen then to be on TV or for whatever reason, which could also happen to your research, because news anchors also want to have the latest news, and they might invite you. And then the same thing, now you're suddenly on national TV, and if you're sitting there being nervous and having tics and everything suddenly, that's not good. So you want to be relaxed. Okay, another thing with a large audience, what you also can do is you can divide it up. So people can easily follow 5, or let's say 4 definitely, including yourself, 4 groups simultaneously. Our capacity in the brain to assemble information can handle 4. So if you're in a group of 5, everyone can communicate with everyone pretty much quickly, because you can read everything from these people. If it's more than 5, then you slow down, because then you have to look here, there, and you can't process everything in your brain. And now just imagine you have 500 people there. So what do you do? Of course, what we suggest then overall is you divide the audience again into segments that you can handle, and you do not process each individual and panicking, going around, oh my God, that someone falls asleep, someone's shaking his head, that is all nonsense what I'm saying. So what you do is you put people in groups. So you say, okay, this group here, this group there, and so on, and you divide then the audience into subgroups, typically in about also 5 groups, 4 or 5 groups, and then see how these groups respond, and then you will basically just have to deal with a group, how it acts, instead of just an individual. Yeah. Okay. So these are a few things. There are it's quite a literature body available. So or you get to talk to people that can provide more information on that if you really run into problems with this. One key thing is also when you give a presentation, it's the posture, body language. People want to see that you're enthusiastic about what you propose. So if you basically stand up there and give them an impression, I don't believe what I'm talking about. I think it's not worthwhile my time. And all of these things, basically, that would be really bad. Also, you should have, you should show energy for what you want to do. And yeah, that's so basically the whole thing, body language, that you basically have to watch out for. Yeah, dress code is another thing. It really varies. If you deal with companies, typically you need to always wear a tie if you meet them. If you're at scientific conferences, many times it's just okay in a shirt. Shorts are usually not okay unless it's a meeting in Hawaii and you know it's not so special. But if it's about funding, usually you're automatically in the more formal way of setting. And of course, depending what country you're in, you have to follow the styles in the country. Yeah, some countries definitely need a tie and everything fully dressed according to code. Others might be a little more relaxed. Okay, so the following presentation I'm going to give you now is for an industry-relevant technology. So it's basically what could be presented to a company. It's not what I would present to the National Science Foundation or National Research Foundation in Korea. So there are some slides, for example, in there that are not not science-based. And oops, that's jumped a little too fast. So what I'm going to talk about today is an effect that is called the plastron effect. That is based on hairy surfaces, integuments that are attached to surfaces. And overall, you can also give this the title cleaner and drier. That is basically what this surface coating that is made through this plastron effect allows. And my name is Wolfgang Sigmund. That's also important to introduce yourself, and you can put whatever affiliation there you're talking about at this time. And so let me come to the problem and the gap in the technologies that is out there. So the overall problem that we typically have is that you have, of course, in the outdoors, rain and water. And in the indoors, similarly, you have oil and dirt. And let's think about your laptops, your smartphones that you nowadays have touch screens. You have oil sticking to them. And so you have all these compounds sticking to the surfaces. And yeah, you have to clean then these surfaces from time to time because it doesn't run, the water doesn't run off, the dirt doesn't just blow off. So you need hot water, you need chemicals, and so on. So that's an overall problem because that consumes energy and wastes also your time. So the gap overall is that at this moment there's only chemistry-based systems available to date with limited performance, and you need specific chemicals that are actually potentially toxic to keep the surfaces clean. And what I'm talking about here is, for example, Teflon-coated systems. But even with Teflon-coated systems, you're running into the area of just hydrophobicity, not into superhydrophobicity or super oleophobicity. So how do we overcome this? This is the so-called plastron effect. So it's an effect based on physics and not on chemistry. So you have to have a system that uses small objects to render the surface different. And so this novel technology is basically a liquid shedding process. And with this, of course, when the liquids are shed, it's also self-cleaning automatically. And the key thing is you can strongly improve the water shedding. And there are several ways of testing this. And this is a test where we just measure the amount of water attached at a 90-degree angle. If you turn something at 90 degrees, even if you have a freshly waxed car, you could retain a lot of water. So if you have a plastron coating on the surface, you lose 98% more of the water. Still a little bit of water is left, but it's so tiny that it's now negligible. And here, exterior paint and siding of your house, for example, the same thing, a lot of water is attached even on vertical surfaces, and with this you can basically shed most of the water. How does this work? As I mentioned earlier, you have small integuments or hair on the surface, and this is shown here. So you have droplets. This is a water droplet or an oil droplet, and as it moves across the surface, it gets in touch with these small integuments, and they start to bend. And that is actually one of the key things, this elastic feature. That changes the game compared to any other technology that is out there so far. And that means when you have then water droplets coming down, and this is a sheet, a plastic sheet, polypropylene, that has been treated on one side with these small hair. They are so small that you can see them in optical experiments. So you get then the water droplets as they come down, they just bounce off. There's no sticking, no interaction. And to the bounciness or to the flexibilities of this hair, in addition, you now have the possibility of keeping the droplets intact. Larger droplets have a big advantage because they roll off more easily. You have more gravitational forces. Other surfaces that are super hydrophobic, they typically are inflexible, so the droplets break up. You have smaller droplets, and therefore you need a much larger rolling angle to get rid of these materials. So where does all this come from? It's bio-inspired, and of course in animal kingdom and plant kingdom has developed these features over quite some time, over millions of years. And one of them is here, the water strider. And you see the water strider, of course, has its legs bent here and touching the water surface. And what you find when you take the legs of the water strider, you find exactly these integuments on the surface of the water strider. And you can measure basically the density, the length. And you see we exactly have this feature. They're bent. They are thinning from the bottom to top. They're about 30 micron length. They are in the size range of several microns at the bottom and moving towards nanometers at the end when they thin. And so this is an example what you can find here on the surface. Basically, you can measure the length, angle, and so on for the water strider. Another thing you see, there's a hierarchy to it, so there are smaller fibers underneath, so you get several layers of support actually. And the physics that we know for superhydrophobicity is, of course, that you can move from the so-called Young's equation here to a Wenzel state. So by roughening a surface, you can already do this, what seems to be so important to make a higher contact angle. So if you take Teflons, which are hydrophobic but not super hydrophobic yet, by roughening Teflon, you can make it actually then look super hydrophobic. But the disadvantage is still that there's quite some interaction. And the interaction here is coming, you have actually a lot of surface area interacting, and so the droplets actually stick, so they don't roll off easily. So what you have to do is then, to make a new design, you have to move from this so-called Wenzel state over to the Cassie-Baxter state. And here now you have, so for the first time now, air pockets. So you have solid bars and air pockets in between, and now you get to really high contact angles because this contact angle is defined by this equation. And so the fraction of the area with solids and fraction of the area with air define basically this contact angle. So you can come to really nice high contact angles, and you actually can move now to super phobic or ultraphobic systems. And this allows us to improve strongly on just the chemistry. So what is in addition to this effect of just solids that are touching something? Now we have flexible hair, and flexible hair as a water droplet pushes down on impact or on pressing with your thumb. The same thing is true for oil. You just bend the hair, and when they bend, they actually have a really interesting phenomenon. If you have a flexible hair and you bend the system, you start to move the fiber down. When you move the fiber down, you actually de-wet the fiber. So these are two lines here. This is basically the new line after pushing, and this is the old line. So when you push the droplet down, the droplet moves down, but the fiber moves down a little bit more than by dynamic process, and so it's de-wetting, and that means the droplet can roll off rather easily. If you do it the other way around with a stiff hair or stiff structure, you push down, and of course the force has to be compensated by wetting a larger surface area, so you actually wet the structure more, and so the systems stick more. So here's a big advantage of the system, and that means now we can do applications with that would be of interest to solve certain problems. So paint is already a key thing. Buildings need to be cleaned regularly, so anything inside, outside that is painted, including also cars. In marine applications, ships and boats is a key thing. Another thing would be, of course, solar cells. any dust, mold, or other collection on the surface could be removed easily with such a coating. And of course, really key thing nowadays with touch screens, anti-fingerprinting, and a lot of consumer goods that are in the stores, either the wrapping or the final product could be coated with such systems. And of course, at the same time, when you do this, you keep water away, and also you get actually anti-corrosion properties as well. And so the advantages of this system would be you save a lot of clean, fresh water because you don't have to wash so often. You save, of course, also a lot of the time. If you just have occasional rain in the outdoors, it cleans it. You have muddy and salt water that can be used for cleaning even, so you don't have to use fresh, clean water. You can use basically wastewater also. And then energy savings are, of course, given because you don't have to heat water to dissolve something and so on, or to wash it off. And you have reduced costs for basically keeping things clean. And so how much is needed actually for this? So overall, it's envisioned to develop several types of coatings, as you've seen, for several applications. So for one coating type will be then one engineer and 3 staff members to do the fabrication and testing of these coatings. Will be calculated in the certain amount of dollars for this special application. Of course, certain materials and supplies to do these coatings and test it. And a rough timeline would be for the shortest development times about 9 months. For the ones that are more complex, like optical requirements on glass substrates, would be longer time periods. And, of course, sorry, this was supposed to be really first. Equipment will be needed for fabrication characterization of the coating also, this depending on the specific application. Yeah, so with this, this is basically concludes this presentation, and then it would be option basically for people to have discussion with this. And then you'll see, depending on who's present, you get then either questions a lot to this here because it's the business people, but it could be also that the engineers are present or the scientists, and then they hammer you much more on the earlier slides here, basically on these things here. They want to understand the process better. They want to have then more literature, not just one publication on something like that. Yeah. So that's the typical thing. And you see here, there's quite a bit of non-science in this part. So it's basically the business part is in there more. And depending who you're talking to, you might want to expand this or the other part more. That's something you have to understand. As a scientist, we're not only responsible later on for science alone when you do these things. Okay, I think that's it, yeah. Okay. So let's move now to another subject for the next 30 minutes. And so the first part was always we needed to raise funds. So the next thing is we have, of course, then to publish. Okay, we have to do the research, depending, of course, whether it's now funding for a startup company, funding for a university setting. You have to report your research efforts. And in companies, typically you go for patents. So that's why when you find professors who came back from industry, university, they might have 50 or 70 patents or even more. Versus when you're at a university, you have to basically publish. Sometimes you also do patents. We talked about this. So now for publishing, there is, of course, it's now here. No, not this one. This is the stack. So I'm going to hand out some material now for you guys. And for him. Oh, you gave it, okay. So this is now, see, I think I have it also in here, so I can put it up at least for the headlines so others can see it too. Okay, so that's the report that I've given out right now. It's from the American Chemical Society journal, ACS Biology, and that is called Chemical Biology, and that is an article written by the editor, actually it's a member board of editors, not by the editor himself. It's James Williamson who wrote that. And so what we're going to talk about now a little bit, based on this paper that you have in your hands, the next step after we completed the research. So overall, of course, the typical tendency nowadays is that we quantify the quality of work with a single number. So that's a strange thing that it happened so quickly from 2000, in the early 2000 something, 2003 or 2005. Hirsch published a paper and formed an H index, which we also call nowadays then the H index or Hirsch index. And that is a number, as you know, we can summarize basically a scientific output with. It has nothing to do with the quality really. It's just an assessment tool. And unfortunately, this assessment tool has taken over in many countries now. So this article that I've given you is a little bit looking at this assessment tool, because the problem is as soon as there's an assessment tool that is being widely used, people play with it, or let's say manipulate the things with it. But they're influenced by it. That's the other thing. Yeah? So we're going to look into this a little bit here. And so that report basically writes, and this is a very successful guy here actually. So he has at that time he had an H index of 40, and he calls this my H index turns 40, my midlife crisis of impact. So what is the crisis that he runs into is like, yeah, look, if you reach the number 50, or in the 50s, you're probably in the territory to become a National Academy member in the United States. And so that's very interesting because it's a very high recognition. Yeah? So the National Academy was founded in the 50s in the United States as a government organization for the best engineers, best scientists. There are 3 branches actually to this, and medical professionals. And yeah, being part of that academy is actually very prestigious. The other thing is they noted here that if you are likely to get a Nobel Prize, you basically typically are in the range of 100, yeah, with the H index. And yeah, so it's really brilliant in some way that you can summarize the output of a person by that number. Of course, if you go back in history, Einstein, when he got his Nobel Prize, didn't have an H index of 100. Of course, nobody calculated that at that time, but you didn't publish that much. People didn't cite that much, therefore, so you couldn't have this. So it's really a very recent development, this H index nonsense in some way. On the other hand, it's being used everywhere. So what you do now as a scientist when you learn your H index is just 40. Oh, I need 100 because I need a Nobel Prize. It's basically the one thought. So how do I move myself up so I could be recognized for that? So the suggestion that this author says here is, yeah, why don't you switch fields? Because let's say if you work in nuclear engineering, that's not what this author says, but if you work in nuclear engineering, the top journal out there to publish in gives you on the order of 1.5 citations a year, 1.1. So that's the impact factor of those journals. So if you start nuclear engineering and you have a few papers cited, you're a king already. If you go, of course, to biology, they're a little bit more active. And depending what field you're in, you can get a lot of citations because a lot of people work on it. Or if you have a small group, you can't get a lot of citations because, yeah, the small group works on that topic, but if only 10 people work on that, you cannot get hundreds of citations unless these people publish hundreds of papers and always cite you. Yeah? So that's the thing. You could switch fields is one possibility. But then, of course, it comes down to how happy are you just because of a number chasing game, suddenly switch fields. The next possibility is write more reviews. So why do you think reviews have an advantage? Pardon me?
They refer to review more than
Yeah, but why do you get more citations for a review article than for an original research article? So reviews are also original work, but it's a summary of literature, of course. So why do you get more citations for that? Correct. So it's you summarize in a review paper that's well written. You summarize, depending how large the field is, between 100 to 1,000 citations from other people. You summarize all their thoughts, condense them into short thing. So someone who wants to just give information about that field picks your review and says, "Oh, look, if you want to learn more about this, look here." And so whatever there is, since you're citing 1,000 papers, for example, it's very likely that there are 200 or 300 people who cite you for that paper, so they don't have to go in and read the original source directly. Yeah, so it's easier for them. That's why reviews are a good way of increasing the number. And then, then the next thing would be implement the discrete system of self-citation. Basically, what you could do is every year you write a review about your own work and cite yourself, and cite yourself many times and everything. And that is, of course, it's allowed, but it wouldn't be really. It gets into the range of not improving the quality of science. So morally, I think it would be really bad to do that. Sometimes, of course, you might be asked to do it because certain journals would like to have a review of your work. But if you do this regularly on purpose, that is I think it's goes against good morals. And of course, he also cites here he decided that this strategy might backfire. Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that he states here then. You could, of course, use then the H-index to do projections, so basically calculate how many citations you get per year, so when you could actually reach now the Nobel Prize level or the National Academy level. So that is something you could do with these numbers. And the last thing is now a little bit more. It's called impact caching. That is now an impact also on science. The H-index, he claims, pushes behavior into not publishing, as we call it, bread and butter publications. Because when you do this, you're not getting your H-index up. If you publish something that is really important, that other people need to do, they might not cite it. They just cite a really key paper, but not how to do it. And so it's actually wasted in some way because it's not moving you up in the H-index, it's not getting citations. The journals don't like it, of course, that's also the thing nowadays. And so we are running into some kind of trap here that you don't publish key findings anymore because they're not likely to bring up your H-index, or the journals don't like it because it won't bring up their reputation. And there's now one possibility, as he sees it. You can do impact caching, which means you've seen these journals now with the online system that they have available. You basically publish your paper, 1 page, and then you add 10 pages of supporting information where you dump in all the information how to do something. And suddenly you have a chance, because you have tons and tons of material added, that somebody cites the paper more likely because of all this additional information. So that's a possibility to do. But it's also, you see, it changes science quite a bit when everyone has this push, basically. Yeah, and I was just see, so the paper from Hirsch was published in 2005 in the Proceedings National Academy of Sciences. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about here now already something that was a little bit, pushing scientists into some shady behavior because of the evaluation system. Of course, we expect that scientists are above that they're ethically correct, but sometimes you find this, of course, that they can't handle that. So they actually are evaluated in some countries, and let's take actually the third piece of information that I brought here. It's the last pages for you. Oh, where is my copy of that? Let's see, I also should have a copy of that part. Here it is. No, that's a Hirsch type paper. Not here. Okay, I need to, let's see, maybe attach to this one because it's a little thick. Here it is, yeah. Okay, found it. So this is now the editorial. It's called Fraud, the H Index and Pasternak. And this is written by Nicholas Kotov. He's also actually one of the professors who's here in the WSU project in Korea. And actually he gave a talk in this very room about a year ago. And so he talks about exactly what I mentioned, that there's a big risk associated with this H index, with this number system. And there's one case at that time, and it happened in China, where they really use this system fully to evaluate faculty. So if you're a faculty member at a university and you want to get tenure, you are under pressure to publish in a high impact factor journal. And so there were two professors that actually faked data to be able to publish in a high impact factor journal. And they were caught then and were fired from the university. They lost also other privileges in the society in China. But they did not go to prison or jail, so that did not happen. But you see there's a gigantic pressure on young scientists, and this is also developing in the United States more and more, that administrators just use simple numbers to evaluate an individual. And the sad thing is, of course, and that's why Pasternak is listed here, that great art, great science cannot be measured just with numbers. And I just talked to a philosopher last week. He told me the biggest thinkers of this planet would have not survived in this new academic environment because they are just not, they're lifetime long creative in this, that they get a high impact factor journal or basically publish constantly. Yeah? So the development of thought, the development of great art, of great thinking is not simple as producing something that is basically a high impact factor journal. Yeah? So that's the key thing. That's something it's important that you need to take in, because you will get asked so many times to publish in Science and Nature and other high impact factor journals, especially in Korea where the demand is high to get into published in these journals, that people don't care so much if it's not in that journal. Yeah. So with this also, we need to look into the ethics of publication, because that's also something. It's a lot of people are not aware what is ethical behavior. There are a lot of rules now, they said, and since it's so complex, there's actually an organization, now you have another handout, and that is called COPE. That's the Committee on Publication Ethics. And it's basically, it says guidelines on good publication practice. So COPE is an organization that was founded in 1997. And you see these things happen actually just in the last 15 years or so, that people get more and more concerned, because before you just did your work, you published. Of course, fraud also happened sometimes, but not because of this high pressure system that we have nowadays today. And yeah, so COPE is a voluntary body providing a discussion forum and advice for scientific editors. So it's other people can join too, but it's mainly for editors. When you edit a journal, you have to figure out whether there's a likelihood for fraud or not. And you need to also know what is actually fraud, because that is a difficult thing to decide sometimes, because it's very challenging. There are very fine lines in between fraud and not being fraud. Some people are just forgetful, and so on. So, so they basically provided some guidelines here to allow to understand what is ethical. Yeah, so let's maybe look into this a little bit here. So they have overall, let's say, I think it's 10 points. In this overall thing, yeah, they have 10 points. Where they talk about pretty much the study and design of an ethical approval. And actually I can also put this slide up here. Yeah, so this is probably good enough. So if you go online, for those people who see it on the internet, you can basically find these documents from COPE directly, and you can then read up on that. It's really important to inform yourself about ethics, because it's so easy to violate if you're not aware what really defines fraud nowadays, or what defines proper ethical behavior. For example, if you work with human beings, you have to get actually specific training. You have to follow specific protocols. Let me see here. Let's just pick a few things out of this. Yeah, so one thing is basically protocols must be carefully agreed by all contributors and collaborators. The final protocol should form part of the research record that you have. That is basically in your research book. And statistical issues should be considered early in study design, including power calculations. That's point number 6 here. To ensure that there are neither too few nor too many participants. So this is, of course, strongly towards biology, where you really have to do proper statistics. We also have to do statistics, of course, in engineering, but it's much easier to handle statistics for samples that we make than for biological groups. But now just think about it. If you run experiments with biology, because some people work with cells, work with even animal experiments. If you're in biomedical field, suddenly you have to also follow exactly what's needed in the biological field, even though you're in engineering. So you can easily cross over from one field into another. And human tissue could be certainly part of a study, and also then highest ethical standards need to be used, and so on. So that was part 1, basically, when you design it. Data analysis, that is actually really important to know that data analysis has to be really properly documented, how you analyze the data. It's really important to understand if you describe how you analyze the data that you measure. You're not committing fraud if you use the wrong data analysis system, because you will most likely do the best data analysis at the time you're doing it. And if you document everything properly, people can later go in and say, oh, yeah, it should not have be done like this, we should have done it like that. So you take your data and just recalculate everything and then have the answer. This goes back to history. Let's say you are well familiar with van der Waals forces, and van der Waals forces between large objects can be calculated. And so Hammaker published a paper where he clearly stated that how he's going to do these calculations and what error he's making. And we still cite his paper nowadays, even though we exactly know that his approach was not correct to get all contributions for van der Waals forces. He had to simplify due to the mathematical tools available at his time. Yeah? And that's the key thing. Data analysis, the same thing. You can calculate, you can analyze your data as you think is the best way to do, and you just have to write down what analysis you've done to do that. Yeah, that let's come to an authorship. That's really a key thing where people have to be aware what their rights and their demands are as an author. Of course, you should, as an author, agree to be on the paper. So once you're famous, you will see that there are individuals who publish, and in order to get the paper published, just write your name on the paper and send it to a journal, and that individual has never seen the paper. Yeah? So that is not ethical behavior. That's, of course, an easy thing to catch. Now, when you're in a lab working somewhere, the question is, who should be included really on a paper? And so it's obvious people who have contributed. It shouldn't be like, let's say, the president of the university because he had coffee with you. In the United States sometimes, especially when there are science and nature papers, the big heads of Bell Labs, for example, wants their name on there. And later on, when the paper comes out as a fraud, which happened before at Bell Labs with a very infamous case with actually 7 papers in Nature and 7 papers in Science that were fraudulent, then these people explained, oh, they actually were not really authors on the paper, even though their name was on it. So that's really important to understand when to put your name on the paper. And here's, again, they explain a little bit. And for you, it's important also that you make sure you understand that. Okay, conflicts of interest. That is something that is now very important, and journals actually require more and more that you actually make statements that you don't have financial interest conflicts. Typically, it's financial interest conflicts, so that you don't have let's say, a patent, or you don't have a contract with a company that sponsors you. So if you describe, drug X from this company is the best in the world, no problems, and in reality they give you $50,000 a year, that is a basic problem. And Harvard and other universities, medical professionals got in big trouble for these things because for years they suppressed data. They didn't publish data, basically. They should have published just because of potentially conflict of interest. And so the public was not informed about adverse effects because the data wasn't presented to the public. Yeah? So these are really things that are important. And also in our field, it's more important because if you claim a certain compound has, let's say, this friction, or it has this strength, and somebody uses it to build something, and these structures fail, then you could basically let's say, be associated with this if you claim that this material would be actually that good. So it's important that you make sure your data is okay, but also that if you find other data that you're not in a conflict of interest, not to release it because of whatever connections you have with someone who's interested not to release that information. Next item here is peer review. That is actually a system done many times. We had this short time ago. Actually, one of the students here pointed out that peer review sometimes fails, and I think maybe the journal didn't even have peer review, but there was a mathematics paper written by a computer program, a computer algorithm that produced a paper, sounded really beautifully mathematically, but had no substance at all. And that was accepted by an open access journal. And yeah, so it's really important to have a system in place to avoid such nonsense to happen. Yeah, so peer review is done in several ways, of course. Do you remember what types are there with peer review? Blind, yeah. Double blind. What is double blind? What happens there?
Nobody knows who is writing or who is reviewing.
Correct. So names are all deleted, and only the editor basically knows the name. Okay, cool. And the institution typically, because there's some journals have a bias or may have a bias towards the institution. So the more famous an institution, the easier they might get the publication. And so double blind eliminates all those risks, and so that's a possibility. Okay. Another point here: redundant publication. That yeah, is also something you have to be careful and aware about. You cannot publish your data twice. But of course, let's say if you write a review paper, reviewing literature, then you can repeat your data. But also, every time you do a repeat publication, you have to explicitly state where the data is from, and then it's not a problem. Yeah, because sometimes you do a really advanced publication, and then you ask people to read all the other papers, and then it might be easier to include original data from the first paper, but then you just mark it, basically say, reproduced with permission from this journal, originally published in whatever, 1999, and you can explain it to the editor that you really include this to make it easier for people to understand what you're talking about. They might say, okay, we don't need this because of space limitations, delete that section and just go on. Redundant publication, of course, can also happen then to you when the same publisher produces the article that you write a really good article and they like it so much, so the end of the year they publish a yearbook. Some publishers do that, so they repeat your article. Of course, what they do then, they write down that, oh, this is a repeat from this paper. So that's also fine. Yeah? So you're allowed to do redundant publication with proper markings. But if you claim, of course, every time, oh, this is new, then this is part what they consider an unethical behavior. And depending on the level, it might be even a fraudulent case then. Yeah, so next point, plagiarism. And that is now something that is, from unreferenced use of others' published and unpublished ideas, including research grant applications to submission under new authorship of a complete paper, sometimes in a different language. It may occur at any stage of planning, research, writing, or publication. It applies to print and electronic versions. So that's something that is challenging because as I see, it applies to a lot of things, and that is something to take serious. You also have to look then into what you put on your websites. That is actually also true for universities, because the shocking thing that you find with universities, you find one university, for example, developing best practices, and other universities copy that material, put it on their website, and don't even reference the original university where they take this from. So these are the things where you sometimes are surprised, all the things that are happening out there. That's why also when you see something, make those people aware that you interact with whatever institution you will be at in the future. And of course then for you, when you write something, it's important to cite properly. That's a key thing nowadays, since we have also computer programs. Your career can be easily endangered. In Germany, politicians had to step down because of proper or lack of proper citations. Basically, they did fraudulent work in the PhD dissertations, and 10 years, 20 years, one is, I think, going up back like more than 20 years now, and they find these things, and then they have to step down. So it's really important to, as I say here, action, all sources should be disclosed. Large amounts of other people's written or illustrative material is to be used. Permission must be sought, basic copyright permission. Yeah? And there are clear guidelines, and you also have courses here at the university, how to cite properly and how to, in addition to that, make it clear if you have a direct quote. Yeah? So these are things that are really important to follow, that everything is fine. The next things are basically duties of editors. I'll skip this right now because this is not so much of importance to you. But media relations, that is something that can easily happen. I've seen this before. The universities nowadays are pressured to publicize. So they have their own reporters that write something. And so you do something that is highly exciting. So the person at the university learns about it, comes to your lab and interviews you, and you tell them this and that. And of course, this at this moment is a release to the public. It's actually publication. So you have to be now sure that you do not endanger patent rights. This is one thing, depending on your company or on the sponsor. You also have to make sure that you do not pre-publicize what you could publish, because some journals like Science or Nature do not accept a paper if it's already on the web or somewhere. So it's because they consider it published. And the bigger thing is, of course, once these things get out, and in the United States, the New York Times is one of the journals, one of the newspapers that still have science sections, but a lot of others gave up actually the science section. And so if there's a publication before actually all the data is complete. For example, one of the scandals that happened was people made experiments with palladium and hydrogen, and it was long speculated because hydrogen packs so dense in palladium that you might get fusion. And what they did then, they made experiments, and strangely the palladium melted, and so they concluded, oh, we must have had cold fusion. And before it was published in a science journal, it went headlines in the New York Times and some other newspapers. And so they had to hold press conferences. And at that time, they did not have all the data in. They just had a few experiments. So it has to be repeated and so on before they can publish. And of course, it turned out that it was just an experimental error. There was no cold fusion. So a big embarrassment. Yeah? But these are things, when you do this, when you talk to the media, it's really important to let them know, look, it's very early. These are first results. We hope to reconfirm them, and then we know about it. Or media likes to over-interpret usually, oh, this is good for everything. In reality, it's not. Yeah. So these are things you have to state and make them aware of, that they don't really put a wrong picture out there. And same thing when you go to conferences. It can also happen that they start to interview you, and you also have to be aware basically what consequences could have. Sometimes it's very difficult to see the consequences because you don't know what context they're coming from, what context they're going to write in the newspaper about it. The next thing, advertising. That's actually the big thing for a journal. Journals have problems with revenue, and so you find sometimes that, especially in the medical field, advertising from drug companies in the same journal where the report is about the same drug, that's obviously a conflict of interest. So these are things that have to be addressed. And that's something also whatever journal you're in, you have to also look at it, whether that might be something you are willing to accept from a journal. If they basically advertise for a company and your research contradicts what this advertising says or conforms with the advertising. The next things are basically some sections about dealing with misconduct, and that's something you can read about at home now. These are basically some guidelines, is that many times it's so complex that's actually why COPE has been formed, so you can actually submit then these questions as an editor. Is this misconduct? Is this not misconduct? How should this be handled? Because a lot of borderline cases, things that people didn't intend or that are just, depending on the country where these things are coming from, handled differently. Yeah? So, yeah. So with this, we're going to end today. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah? Okay, thanks.